Good evening and welcome to another episode of Law and Order. With the country now gradually opening its avenues for normal life, something that will really occur is also the opening of courts. The case has been handled physically with the upcoming weeks ahead. Something that would be talked about is what is child protection? What does the child protection law mean in Sri Lanka? How does a child get protected from all the violations of various individuals and various things that happen to a child? What is the age limit that these children can be protected by the child protection law? Well, to discuss all that, joining me this evening is attorney at law and founder of the Child Protection Force, Milani Salpiti Korala. Very good evening to you, ma'am.
Good evening.
Child protection, something that is being talked about. We've seen this a lot of children, very underage children come into various incidents. What exactly is child protection law?
So, child protection law ideally is the law in the country, law of the land, that is already established to safeguard and protect a child. So, this can amount to various laws. We have the penal laws which define the crimes against a child. Then we have the Children and Young Persons Ordinance. So, this is particularly for the care and protection of the child. We have the adoption laws. We have a current bill in Parliament called the Children's Rights Judicial Bill that hasn't been made law as yet. So, all these laws, the specific idea of this law and also from the ICCPR Act is that this law is placed in the country, it is already established for the best interest of the child. So, to safeguard the child, and that is what every actor of state or anyone who is working for child protection, their main mandate or their main policy has to be the best interest of the child.
So, when you say child protection law, what are there are various crimes that have been created with children. What are the crimes that really come under this law protection?
So, this comes particularly under the penal laws, and you know, when people talk about crimes against children, one of the I don't know whether it is because of the dramatic effect of it, but a lot of people talk about sexual abuse, but there is a lot more abuse that a child can go through, or a rights violation a child can go through, which is also physical abuse, murder of course of a child, harm caused physically, emotionally. Then there is also neglect. Example would be if both parents, now yesterday's case I was talking to you before the show, was the father is an alcoholic and the mother is a sex worker. So, the children are neglected. So, neglect can be one of the cruelty towards a child. If you keep the child without giving them food or completely neglecting them, that would be also a crime against a child. Again, other things would be in situations of within the home environment, if there is domestic violence, parents are hitting each other, they are being aggressive towards each other, children see this, or accidentally a child gets harmed or injured as well. So, all of these come under crimes against children, and particularly within our penal laws.
What about the verbal abusement that comes in?
So, that would also amount to the emotional abuse that a child will go through.
Yeah. So, does this law differ from like say country to country, or is it the same that is being practiced around the world?
So, Sri Lanka is a British colony, and most of our laws are very similar to the British laws and even to the Singapore laws. So, most of the colonized countries have the similar laws to the British laws, and but yes, they are all different in different countries. In the developed countries and in some of the most developed European countries, where their child policies are some of the best in the world. So, within the country's policy itself, child policies are at the top, and you would see the reason why. I mean, the countries are flourishing. So, in these countries also some of the laws with us are the same, but just that their laws are now reformed to cater to the society today. It's completely different from when you and I were small. So now it is catered to today's society, but for us, our laws are still very archaic. But I do know that there are law reform committees appointed now, and I do hope that these new work of these committees, very hard-working committees, will see the light of day soon. Also, except for the USA, the entire world has signed and ratified the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child. But Sri Lanka is a dualist country, so international laws don't automatically become our laws. So we have to make it law. But Sri Lanka hasn't made the Convention on the Rights of the Child law as yet. But we are a signatory, so we are under obligation to have those rights available to every single child in the country. So it's just an obligation. So just if we don't do it, not that the country is going to be penalized or anything, but just that
as a practice, you need to
yes.
follow the guidelines
Correct.
issued by the UNICEF.
Yeah, by the UNCRC. So the UNCRC itself is excellent. I mean, the articles on it is excellent, and that itself, if it's made law, I think that's perfectly enough. But yeah, so it is a universal law around the country, except for the USA. All the other countries have signed and ratified it.
What is the age category that the child protection comes in? Is it from birth to a certain age limit? Even does the teenager also get covered in this child protection law?
Yes. So ideally, the universal standard for the age of adulthood or the age of a child is any person below the age of 18. However, in Sri Lankan laws, in different Sri Lankan laws, like for example, the Children and Young Persons Ordinance says that a child is a person below the age of 14 and a young person is a person below the age of 16. Adoption laws say this law applies only to children below the age of 14. Labor laws, it's different. Then the age of criminal liability is different. However, the normal standard that is understood and taken into account is a person below the age of 18.
So who governs this child protection law? Like, is it the state that calls all the shots in?
Well, ideally, yes. If the law needs to be reformed, it has to take the usual process of through a parliamentary act. And of course, ideally, the enforcement of it is done by the Women and Children's Ministry or the National Child Protection Authority, the authority which has an overall mandate. And of course, law enforcement, which is the police. So ideally, yes, it is a state.
Right. So what are the, if you can give us some explanations or examples on what are the type of crimes that really come under this with examples?
Okay, I can give you examples till morning. So if it's physical abuse of a child, I'm going to give you examples of the cases we already have. So we have a 10-year-old child who has come to us just because she's suicidal. Parents were in severe domestic violence. The mother and the children used to be locked up in a room for 3 days without access to toilets or food or anything. This child was beaten up since she was 2 years old. And this is not in a poor community or anything. It's within this Colombo, society, people who go to good schools. Since she was 2 years old, she was beaten up, punched, not slapped or anything. She was punched. She never got a
by both parents, or was it
by the father? She wasn't allowed to sit on chairs. She had to always sit on the ground. So she said when she was 6, 7, she started seeing things. So paranoia, and then she said they're calling me. So it was a suicidal situation. So this is one. There was one child, the case we did, I think that is also a very popular case, where he was 7 years old, sweet little boy, whose mother left him. Father was a drug addict, but also kind of wealthy family out of Colombo, was taken care of by the relatives. And the guy who grazes the cows around that area used to take the children and show them baby cows and animals and so on. So this child had gone behind him saying that he had a calf to show the boy, and this boy was raped, grave sexually abused, and he was throttled and killed and left there. So that would be a grave crime. This guy is still in remand, thankfully.
Yeah.
Neglect would be a situation where, like I said, both parents are drug abusers, or one is an alcoholic, one is a sex worker, and in such a situation, when the children are neglected, they are not fed, they are not taken care of, they are sick. In such a situation, it could be cruelty towards a child. Emotional abuse again would be situations of domestic violence, where they have a direct right to go towards law enforcement, and for law enforcement has a duty to act immediately.
Milani, I just want to find out now, how does the whole process work if somebody wants to start, file a case, or even before that? What is the entire procedure? How does it all start? Now, for example, as you said, if both parents, the father is a drug addict, the mother is a sex worker, obviously they wouldn't go to authority to look for protection for their child. They will just keep the ball rolling. So who can act on this? Can an outsider come in, intervene and start? How does the entire process work?
So ideally it would be anyone. It can be one of the parents, it can be a grandparent, it can be a neighbor, whoever is willing to come out and report. And I mean, if there is anybody watching this, I plead for people to actually go and report, because it's very important. So initially the first respondent is always the police or the National Child Protection Authority. They also have a police unit inside of them. Okay. So once you report to the police, make sure that you read your statement and you sign it. After you read it, get your receipt with the WCIB or the CIB numbers, you get your receipt. Thereafter, they will call in the child and the parents or the abuser and all that, and if it is a arrestable offence, they will arrest the perpetrator. And just then also the police has a duty to inform the area probation officer of either where the crime happened or where the child is residing. And thereafter the probation officer has a duty to contact the child or get the child to the probation office, because the court will always ask for a probation report, right. So at that point the police will report facts to court and a case file is opened, and thereafter if the perpetrator is arrested or whatever, he will be brought, his defense lawyers will appear. For the child is a victim, the state has to appear on behalf of the child. So in the initial stages it is only the police, but like what we do, a lawyer representing the victim can appear on behalf of the child only to ensure that the child's rights are protected. And thereafter the court case will take its usual course. But if the child is, say, there is physical harm, there is sexual harm, even if there is emotional harm, the police also has to refer the child to the judicial medical officer, who will do a full examination of physical or emotional harm through a psychiatrist, and these reports will also be submitted to court.
So in most of the police stations we do find a unit called the Women and Child Protection some unit that they have. So is that the first place that you take this thing up?
So ideally we also discuss a lot of this when we talk about secondary victimization also. First thing is, you take a child and you go and you have to tell the reception why you are there, and it will be referred to the police Women and Children's Bureau desk at the police station. I believe all police stations except for a very few small units don't have this desk, but otherwise all police stations have the Women and Children's desk, and also their head office, which is in Armour Street. You can also go there. You don't have to go to your area police station, you can also go there. And yes, it is first reported there, but they have a, I think it's in the police ordinance, they have a mandate that the Women and Children's Bureau officer has to refer it to the OIC or to the ASP in that division before or while writing down the complaint. Then through the OIC's advice is when they take down the complaint, and thereafter inquiry or arrest or the usual course.
Okay, I would like to find out, for example, if the parents object of the child being taken into this into a police station by an outsider, looking from outside, feels that okay, this child is being abused or whatever, but then if the parents, can the parents object on this?
Parents can always object, but the outsider can always go and make the complaint, and the police has the right, whether or not the parents object, to do that investigation.
So, what are the courts that hear these cases? Is the magistrate courts that hears these cases?
Yes, so it starts off with the magistrates courts because it's a criminal case, but also there are 2 juvenile magistrates courts in the country, one in Battaramulla, one in Jaffna, which has the sole mandate for the care and protection of the child. So, I think I also saw news where the Honorable Minister had said that there are going to be juvenile magistrates courts in all provinces. I hope that sees the light of day as well, because it's much needed. So, juvenile magistrates courts, but also cases like custody and so on. These cases are directly civil matters that go into the district court.
So, obviously 2 centres like in Jaffna and Colombo. So, I think how do you categorize or segregate who needs to go to Colombo, who needs to go to Jaffna?
Yeah, so what happens is, it depends on what cases are received there, and also a big problem there is that court only has the mandate to place the child. So, the care and safety of the child, and not on the criminal aspects of the case. So, in that situation, the criminal aspect will be in another magistrate's court, and the care and protection will be in the juvenile magistrate's court. So, ideally it is also not very practical, but if that court also has the jurisdiction to do here and finish the entire case, that would be ideal.
How long does a normal case take if it goes into magistrate's court or whatever?
Yes.
How
I am going to give you an example of one of my cases, of a boy who was initially burnt by the same perpetrator who later raped him. So, he was 5 years old when he was burnt. Today he is 16 years old, and the burnt case trial is in the High Court now. So, 5 to 16, now it's 11 years. And the sexual abuse case, which happened when he was 12, so it's been 4 years now. I have initiated it. We started it 4 years ago. It is still in the magistrate's court, and I think still the judicial medical officer's report has not even been received by court. So, this is a delay.
And any particular reason for these to just keep dragging on despite the COVID?
Despite the COVID, I honestly don't understand. I feel it's just a matter of every officer working within this sector needs to take the job at heart and just get going.
Or does it, like, say, for in normal cases you see the first hearing, then it's postponed to another day? Does it just in the same manner, does it keep on dragging on and on because of some shortage of some evidence that comes in?
Yes, it does, but also almost always there is no lawyer representing the victim. And if, say, if there is a lawyer representing the victim, we can also create that pressure to the police, you know, get a short date. Let's finish this soon. The child needs to be reintegrated. Child needs to get back into a sense of normalcy. Can't keep coming to court. So, somebody needs to do that push to get it going faster.
So, as you said, it's mostly the state that represents the victim, is it?
Yes.
Right. So, what happens, like, say, if the child, as I said, goes beyond the age of 18 and the case still goes on continuing? So, still does the child protection law apply to it?
It does. So, the case goes on. We have had a lot of clients who have married now, they have children, or they want to go overseas for higher education, who come and say, look, our life is ruined because of this case. What can we do? Can we at least call it off now? And because our system is unfortunately a victim blaming system, and it's not a victim friendly system, I would say, and in my opinion that is, and because almost always the perpetrator is out on bail. Now, one of our cases where 7 young boys were subject to grave sexual abuse, the perpetrator was in remand for about 2 weeks, and he is back at the same place with access to many more other children. But the victim is the one facing all the taboo, the social issues with the media, unfortunately. So it's more of a victim unfriendly system and a perpetrator friendly system. So I honestly don't know how this can.
Another thing, like the child also can get mentally affected with a lot of abuse that comes in, even if the child is not sure. So who takes the call on what type of things needs to be done with the victim?
So if the child is referred to the judicial medical officer, the judicial medical officer takes the call to send the child to the psychiatrist or psychologist or so ever. If I get a case of child abuse, the first thing I do initially is, of course, the legal proceedings. Alternatively, or parallelly, not alternatively, parallelly, we also make sure that the child sees a clinical psychologist, a registered clinical psychologist specializing in children. So that is very important. Sometimes it's not only the child, it's also that caregiver, whoever is with the child, who has also seen that trauma, been with the child, who also needs mental health assistance. And it's a kind of healing process to reintegrate them. There is a amazing center set up by the government. It's a state sector place called Lama PSA, but it's also a very small unit and not very popular also. But what I have seen is every child who has been treated at Lama PSA, who has come out of Lama PSA, they have found it easy to reintegrate. They're back studying, they're
Is it like a rehabilitation center or something,
so
something similar to that? Where
it comes within the health ministry. So yes, psychology, I also think psychiatrists, and also alternative therapies like art and music and all those things as well, where children are felt safe.
To be distracted from what they went through.
Yes.
I think we've talked a lot on what this child protection law is and how does it all apply in Sri Lanka, where are these cases being heard, what does a person need. Another thing I would like to ask you, Melanie, is like, does the evidence of a young child, maybe below the age of 5, 6, been taken in by the court as very productive evidence?
So yes, what the child says. What the court can also order for video evidence to be collected from the child, and thereafter the child doesn't need to come and state what he has said all the time again. So there are video evidence recording rooms at Lama PSA, at the National Child Protection Authority, and I think there is another one in Jaffna, I'm not very sure, and I think recently they opened another one. So these are the only video evidence recording rooms in Sri Lanka when there is a massive long line of children waiting to give video evidence. So that process is also being extremely delayed. But yes, this is one of the main ways of how it is easier to collect that evidence of the child, and this is used in every other country. India has beautiful video evidence recording rooms. So, I mean, I think it's just a matter of Sri Lanka progressing towards that.
So, does a child be taken in a court case, brought into the evidence like the cubicle to give evidence?
Yes, at the trial stage they do. I'm going to give you a small example on that if you don't mind. If
I think
time
unfortunately time has caught up, but then
no
as we continue we can definitely go into our next program on
No
that. So let me first of all thank you, Melanie, for joining us on this very important topic, child protection law, because I think there's so much of things that you can talk and go on and on, but definitely we will catch up all that on our next program.
Thank you so much.
Well, with that we come to the conclusion of today's episode of Law and Order. Hope you had a very wide knowledge and good insight on what child protection law is. We'll be with you next week for our next episode of Law and Order. Till then, it's good night.